Hello everybody, so today I'm just making this little video documenting a small miniature algorithmic project that I made. I'm not going to be diving too deep into explaining how the instruments and the algorithms themselves work, stuff that we've covered in classes and whatnot, but what I am going to talk about is for your submission, how to sort of structure and sequence your generative tracks, so being able to turn them off and on. Obviously it gets a bit confusing sometimes with Max and Ableton having seemingly different timelines. So yeah, this is going to be a short video on how to organise that. I'm just going to start off, I'll show you the piece in total, just so that you can get a hear for it. So here we go. Wonderful. So now that we've had an opportunity to have a listen to that, let's break down each individual MIDI channel, which contains the instruments, the algorithms, etc. However, we're not going to be concerned too much with that in this video. We're going to be looking at how to structure, organise and sequence these devices so that we can turn them off when we need to, on when we need to during a performance or a composition. Okay? So first of all, let's have a look at this additive synth. Now if I just play that solo, you might notice that this arpeggiator is doing all the work. So in this one, the arpeggiator is generating some melodies. It's just an arpeggio based on this chord, and it's just scaling it to C major. So the interesting thing here that we're doing is we're applying a Metro 4N over here to a random 7, so it's randomly producing numbers between 0 and 6. Now, the reason that's interesting is we've got this preset object here, which is linked up to produce 7 different sounds in total. using the envelopes and the oscillators along here. So depending on what number we input into this preset object, the sound sounds different. And through this metro, we're changing that sound every quarter note. And we can trigger that on and off using this live toggle here. So if I turn that off, for example, and we play it back, it just sounds the same every repetition. Okay, so with this one, it's not that particularly interested in terms of sequencing it, because basically if there's no MIDI data, the arpeggiator's got nothing to work with. So for example, in this clip here, we've got nothing. If I'm playing it, I turn it off, we've got no notes playing anymore. Simple for that one. Now the second channel is this one over here. We've got break uncut, it's called. It's just the break beat on itself. Nothing maxy about this one, nothing fancy going on here. It's just a plain old break beat, just to keep things going. But we will revisit that sample in a minute on a different device in an algorithmic form. Okay, so keyboard sampler. Now this one here is based on something we worked on, I think it was week 5 maybe, under sampling. And it is a fairly simple random drum sampler. I've loaded in 6 different hi-hats, and it gets loaded into SF Play depending on which random number is generated up here. Now I've got random 13, but I've got cell 1 to 6. So 6 of those random numbers will generate a hi-hat of some form, and then the remainders will just be rests, nothing will happen, okay? Now for this one, because there's no MIDI data concerned in terms of like clips, what we need to do is create a dummy clip so that we can turn this on or off, because as soon as I click go on that, it's going to start playing when Ableton is running. So what we have to do in order to do this is create dummy clips, like I said. So I want to start with it off, and I want it to begin on the second scene. So what I can do here is I'll create these fresh dummy clips. Now, first of all, I need to locate my device under envelopes here. That might not be open for you, so you just need to make sure that these views are open. Go to envelopes on your track, under the clip. Go to mixer, and you choose your device here. So it is my keyboard sampler. And then it's going to give you a list of objects in there that are compatible. They're going to be live objects. So I used my live toggle. Whoop. What have I just done? Live toggle. Okay, so I want to start with the device off. So there we go. This clip now has data to tell it to turn off. However, the next clip, let me just turn that on. So it's not playing here, but then as soon as I trigger this one, nothing happens either. That's interesting. Oh, I turned the device off. That was a bit silly of me. Okay, so we're getting these random hi-hats, but as soon as I click this clip over here, it's going to turn it off. I can name that off and on. Simple. Now I use that technique quite a lot across different devices. So basically you're just, you've got an on and off switch within Max, but you're using Ableton to sequence it in the places that you want to. Obviously that could be random, there's all sorts of different ways of structuring it. This is just one. Now I've got a polysynth over here. Now this one's interesting because initially it's not necessarily a generative instrument, but I mean it is, but it's based on the keyboard sampler over here. Let me explain. So here we've got a chord, or a chord sequence. Now if I play that alone, not much is happening. You can hear it very faintly. And that is because it's being gated by the generative drums. So we're generating random hi-hats, and then the amplitude, the peaks of those drums are being measured, and they're being used to trigger the polysynth. So if I turn the gate off, it's just a constant drony chord. But by turning that on, it turns it into a nice sort of pad sequence, dub kind of thing going on based on these drums. So if we solo both of them, you should hear the parallel there. So yeah, basically with this polysynth, I'm getting the generative behavior from this gate instrument. However, the polysynth has a second purpose. So if I want to turn that off, obviously because it's again based on MIDI data, I can just turn it off here and we won't hear anything. However, later on in the performance, I've got this moment where the actual chords are generated randomly and we've got no clip. So if I just play that bit here. Okay, and you'll notice that the gate's turned off as well. So let me just open up the patch and we can have a quick look at it. So this is the polysynth patch that we've worked on. Most of you will probably know it all very well. And I've linked a sort of white noise, which is, a sine wave at 0.1 hertz, taking a snapshot, and it's just basically an LFO on the biquad filter over here. But that's not what we're looking at. Over here, so this is for the second section. So the first section is our polysynth, just playing a random, playing this constant drone, and the hi-hats are gating it in a generative manner. Now what we've got is a second section. So it says, when a clip activates this live toggle, Metro 4M will generate numbers between 0 and 9, with numbers 1, 2 and 3 generating chords. So we've got 3 chords here that are just going straight into our prepend MIDI note from our polysynth. I can play these individually. So these two are the same more or less. Just 3 chords. And yeah, it's got a 3 in 10, almost like a 1/3 chance that is going to produce one of these chords through this random number generator. So it's randomly generating 10 numbers, sorry, not 10 numbers, numbers between 0 and 9, and if it's a 1, 2 or a 3, then it's going to trigger one of these chords. It's pretty cool. Now, there is a slight conflict here because obviously I've got 2 different ways of using this polysynth, one that is generative based on the keyboard sampler and one that is based on the random chords that have been generated. So basically what I need to do is I need to automate both this toggle, which turns on or off the generative moment in the second section, and I also need to turn on or off this gate because otherwise the first section won't work and nor would the second. So all I've done here is I've gone onto my polysynth, into my clip here. So in this particular instance, I will have it set up so that the number box, oh no, that's a different thing. So the live toggle is off. So there's no generative element. This is literally just the gate. And if I have a look at the, if I trigger this one, you'll see that the gate is turned on. So the gate's all normal. However, if I go down to these later clips, it's now turned off the gate. So within the clip automation, I've basically just gone to the gate, device on, I've turned it off. And on the polysynth, I've gone over and I've turned the live toggle on. So I've literally just switched between them depending on the behavior that I want. Okay. Next, we've got the electric bass. Now, this one's not actually using any Macs. I thought I'd put a little twist on this. So this is using follow actions. Anybody that doesn't know what follow actions are, they're behavior that's stored within a clip to tell it what clip to go to next. So it's kind of like a way of sequencing clips. Now, in order to do this, you have to make sure that you've got the launch box open under here. So over here, you just turn that on. Now, where you see follow action here, you're looking at this middle left just here. You can explore the rest of them in your own time, but for this particular purpose, I've used this middle left instance and I've got it under any, which is essentially random. So what this is going to do is whenever I trigger this clip, it's going to randomly choose a clip on the same track to trigger. Simple as that. It's just going to randomly trigger another clip. So what I did is I had to apply that to all of these. You can do that nice and easily by just selecting all of your clips and then choosing the behavior, and it will apply them to all of them. And then I just recorded 8 different or 7 different bass lines, so they're all slightly different. And so if I go ahead and play one of these clips, just randomly going through them. And I've written them in a way that they kind of work wherever they are, whilst offering variation. So you could have made this in a Max patch, but I thought it'd be an interesting alternative. Okay, and in order to stop that, I can literally just click stop because this is an empty clip. Okay, so next up we've got channel 6, the break masher. Now, this is a device that takes a drum break and chops it up into different pieces. You'll probably recognise the break from earlier on the second channel. Let's have a listen to it. Cool, so basically it's taking the drum beat and it's mashing it up into different instances of the same beat. Now, again, I'm not going to go too deep into how this has been achieved, but it's not too complicated. We've basically got a drum break. We're taking the total milliseconds in length, dividing it by 16 to give us 16 different chunks of the loop, and then we're using random numbers to trigger it. Now, I've changed things up a little bit on how it was done this time. Instead of using the classic Metro to drive everything, I'm actually using PlugSync. So I'm taking, PlugSync is basically observing the behavior of Ableton. So over here, I've got it analyzing the transport states to say if it's on or off. And over here, I've got the current beat count. Now, the reason I'm doing this is basically every time this beat count changes, it's going to turn on or off this gate going into Metro A10. So this Metro A10 is constantly going to be churning out different numbers, which will randomly create a beat. However, if we read this here, it says, this patch drives the loop randomizer at a rate of A10. Metro will generate numbers between 0 and 23. So numbers 0 to 15 will trigger a random drum loop slice. Numbers 16 to 23 will be just rest. It will just continue the playback of the last slice until a new one's created. But this happens except for during the first beat of the bar. That's why I've used PlugSync. I want to analyze when we're at the first beat of the bar. The reason I'm doing that is because if I didn't, and it's random on every single beat, it's just going to sound a little bit weird. It's going to sound a bit too much, a bit too random. But by bringing it back to the start of the beat, at the start of every bar, it just allows there to be a little bit of space for it to breathe. So the first beat is always the first beat, and then everything else can be completely random. So because I've used PlugSync for this, it was a little bit more difficult to automate when this device is on or off, and ultimately I just decided to use a gate. So over here I've got a gate signal, so the audio is going through, and basically once again I'm just using a live toggle to turn this on or off. On allows the audio to go through the gate, and off won't. Okay, so fairly simple on that one. So once again I've just got dummy clips set up on the off here. If I go to break masher, I've got my live toggle off. Over here I've got it on. Okay, fairly simple there. Now the next one, it's pretty nice. This track number 7 is a guitar. Now if we have a listen to that, it's kind of like an improvised guitar solo situation. Now you might be thinking, Callum, you're so good at playing the guitar. How did you record that incredible guitar solo? It's not a real guitar, and I wasn't even playing it. So let me show you how this works. First of all, I've got the guitar pack from Ableton, which is giving us this nice way of recording electric guitars without even having one in the room. But the generation comes a little bit different this time. So I'm not using just random number generators like we have in the past devices, but this is using Markov chains. Now I'll give a brief sort of description of the Markov chains over here, and yeah, we've got some patches. I think it was on week 8 describing all of this. But essentially what I've done is I'm using PlugSync once again up here to drive this random note generation, but we've got 2 different things going on here. We've got one, every quarter note is changing the generation rate, so it's actually a metro driving the speed of a metro. Okay, so every quarter note of Ableton is going to randomly generate a number between 0 and 4, which will pick a metro speed off of this live menu, which then goes into our main metro. This is what actually drives the pitch generation. So this bang here is going into prob, and it's going to generate a new note. Like I said, prob is described and explained properly. I think it's week 8 or 9, but let me just reiterate it very briefly. So this message right here contains essentially a probability table. We've got 6 different drums down here. Not drums, sorry, 6 different notes, which I felt sounded good together. Sort of like pentatonic scale, I think. C pentatonic, maybe, minor. And yeah, this message up here is essentially saying, so let's say we start on number 1, which is this note here, note 1. The chance that it is going to go from state 1 to state 2 is 100%. So if at any point the first note is generated, we know that it's going to go straight to note number 2. Now, note number 2's got more probabilities. It's got a 40% chance of going to note number 3, a 40% chance of going to note number 5, and a 10% chance of going to number 6, 10% going to number 7. So this particular one, state 2, it's got 4 different possibilities, some that are more likely than others. Okay? I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but you get the picture. I've basically got a probability table set, and it's set to start on note number 1. So then what we have is our Metro 16N, or dependent on what interval is picked over here. It's going to drive this kick. Now, to turn this on and off, once again, because I'm using PlugSync, I need to find an alternative. And yeah, I'm just using a gate again. But this time, it's not signal we're dealing with, it's just data. So instead of using gate signal, I've just used this one, which is a G-gate, G-gate, as it's called. So yeah, it's just turned off or on. If I turn it off, the data is going to stop coming through. It's going to stop triggering notes. Simple as that. Okay. So yeah, just to reiterate that, if I go here when I first start off, over to my note Markov chain or whatever it's called, live toggle, and you can see that it's turned off until this improvised section later on where I turn it back on. So yeah, here it is in context. And finally, I've got one more track for you. I actually lied to you earlier on. I told you it was 9 tracks, but I've just realised that this audio track here is dead. I can delete that. Yeah, we've basically got just an extra synth I added for a bit of a laugh, and it's quite similar to the additive synth in a sense, but instead of changing the preset of the sound, it's changing the octave. So we've got this basic little melody going on down here. If I just turn the Octaver device off and I click play, this is the same every time, nothing generative about it or anything. It's just a nice little melody. However, when I turn my Octaver on, creates this really nice, sort of like glitchy 8-bit sounding synthesizer. And yeah, those of you with a keen ear will notice it's a pretty simple device. Literally all I'm doing is changing the octave. So I've got my note in coming here. And this, I've been a little bit crazy. It's not very CPU inefficient, but this one doesn't even turn on or off. It's just constantly running throughout the entire patch. So every 50 milliseconds, it's randomly generating a number between 0 and 5, which is according to one of these octaves, like -12, +12, 0, etc. And this is just going into an addition object with my note in, going into the inlet, and it going back out to the note out. So all it's doing is just taking the MIDI data that we've got over here, and it's applying this crazy random octave to it and giving us this nice sound. It's glitching my computer out a bit as well. But yeah, that is pretty much everything. I'm going to cut this video here. If anybody has got any questions, queries about anything that I covered in this video, please let me know. Like I said, I wasn't really intending to explore the instruments themselves. It's more just the matter of sequencing them. So any particular questions on that, please get in touch. All right. Cheers, guys.